Welcome, my friends, my colleagues, to Build Your Leadership Brain. This is part of the journey that I have made since I became a project management professional back in 2005. So, on studying for the PMP exam back in 2005, I realized that the topic of leadership was coming up a little bit, not as much as it has in the more recent editions of the Pembroke Guide. But this went on for a bit, and I realized I've got a game plan for project management. I've got a framework. But if you were to ask me what leadership was, it's hard for me to break down. This became more apparent in 2010 when I was asked to train PMP certified members of a company for professional development units. And I realized I was empty in terms of knowing what leadership was and being able to train and coach and mentor people about how to effectively lead. So I began rummaging through the books that I had, and I realized I needed to get better books. So I got a book called The 360-Degree Leader by John Maxwell. Now, around that same time, I'd heard that John had come to speak at our church, and I looked at the book in the bookstore and I thought, well, I might as well just go the full mile. I might as well get the entire curriculum. So I bought the entire curriculum and started devouring it and reading it, studying it, really going deeper into it. And after a while, I realized I needed to know more. So I ring up John's company, send them an email, I believe it was, and I asked, does John have any mentorship or coaching or some program to really train, coach, help people better understand leadership? And the answer was no, John doesn't have anything like that at the moment. This was 2010. So I ended up doing this symposium for these PMPs, ended up using the 360-degree leader. I really liked it, but I needed to know more. 2011, all of a sudden, there was an announcement on social media that John was starting a team of experts, leadership coaches, mentors, trainers, people who could come, learn, grow, and become an amplification of John's voice. So I was very fortunate to be part of the foundational members who joined the John Maxwell team. Eventually met John and started studying even more, reading all his curriculum, the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, not only reading it and studying it, but I began teaching it to firms. I studied the 5 levels of leadership. I studied Everyone Communicates, Few Connect, How to Be a Real Success, all of John's literature. And before you could blink, I was deeply immersed into that world of leadership, really understanding what it is and also teaching, training, and helping others. So, around when COVID happened, I realized that there was a need for greater levels of leadership, greater understanding of leadership amongst people, around me. And I decided, based on John's influence, to form what we today call the Project Leadership Institute. The Project Leadership Institute was founded in 2021. John Maxwell was our keynote speaker, set us on the right path towards leadership. And now lots of our members are teaching, training, coaching, leadership, helping others. They've gotten a lot more confident. So tonight, this is part of my evolution in the world of business, not only to get PMP certified, but about 5, 6 years in, I joined the John Maxwell team. And that's when I started my leadership journey proper. But when I ask people, what is leadership? A lot of times I get either crickets or I get blank stares. And that's why today I'll be sharing my leadership framework with you. I'm going to put that in the chat. You can download the image to remind you of what we're going to talk about. But Build Your Leadership Brain is a mirror of the evolution I went through. And this book, you can get this book on Amazon or other places where books are sold. But I realized that I needed to evolve in leadership, and my evolution journey is pretty much captured here because I break down leadership into the very basics. And that's really what we're going into today, right? Build Your Leadership Brain. So, welcome once again. A quote from John Maxwell says, "The true measure of leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less." This absolutely demystified the topic of leadership for me because for a long time, I had been thinking of leadership as so many things, and it is many things, but when you boil it down, leadership is all about influence. And John knows this well. We often refer to him as America's leadership guru. He's one of the world's foremost authorities on leadership. And John reminds us that leadership isn't about title, it's not about position, it's not about the org chart, it's all about influence. Another quote from another well known leader, Simon Sinek, he says, "Leadership is not about being in charge, it's about taking care of people in your charge." So when you boil leadership down, it's about being a positive influence. Now, why does this book matter? The reason why this book, Build Your Leadership Brain, matters is leaders often operate on autopilot. They are unaware of their mental habits that are steering their behavior. In fact, I've interacted with a lot of PMPs, a lot of project managers, and when I hear the horror stories of their leadership and how they are treated, I understand that a lot of business professionals are not fully aware of what leadership means. You see, without intention, influence happens by accident. So you need to get more intentional about influence. We need a clear, actionable framework for daily influence practice. In chapter one, I talk about my journey to conscious leadership. At first, it was pretty unconscious. I actually remember when the PMBOK Guide 5th edition came out, I began to realize, yeah, PMI is onto some Project Management Institute. Because in this book, this is the 5th edition, at the back of the book, there's actually a section on soft skills, and one of the sections there is on leadership. I was quite happy to see this because, John has another quote. He says, "Everything rises and falls on leadership. Your success in life rises and falls on leadership. Your success as a project manager rises and falls on leadership. Your success as a business person, it rises and falls on leadership." So seeing it talked about in a book such as this on page 513, I was quite happy. But still, there's a disconnect when you ask people about leadership because we got to switch on from just being on autopilot, just free thinking, to being intentional. So we need to recognize unconscious habits and we need to choose our leadership path. So, the very first thing I want you to be aware of is leadership growth will not happen by dumb luck. In order to lead in today's world, today's AI driven age, you need intentionality. You need a game plan. You need to put it on your agenda to study leadership, to at least read leadership literature and absorb it and practice it, such as The Five Levels of Leadership by John Maxwell. That's a book I would highly recommend. I'd also highly recommend The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. These are books that will help you recognize your unconscious habits that have actually helped you. Because some people just have some great habits that they are oblivious to, but these habits have helped them develop as leaders. So we have to be more conscious as students of leadership, growing in leadership and evolving. In chapter two, I stress that leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. I also talk about influence being the true currency of leadership. Titles and budgets, they get stripped away, don't they? We even see in organizations people who are higher up, they get demoted. But leadership, you cannot demote leadership because leadership is all about influence, and you don't need a title or position to begin to influence. For example, the janitor could be in another life the union boss. Now, it doesn't mean that he needs the position in the organization to influence, but he has influence because of who he is outside. So don't just think about your position as being your leadership leverage. You can only lead so much with position. What happens if you're in a nonprofit where almost everyone is a volunteer? In order to lead in places like that, you need more than position. Position will only take you so far. In fact, in John's 5 levels of leadership, position is the most primitive level. It's level 1. Going above level 1, we get into the likability level, which is level 2, where people follow you. People allow you to influence them because they like you, because there is that respect, right? So, as opposed to just staying at level 1, where a lot of project managers will find themselves in the beginning, a lot of managers and even director level folks will find themselves. In order to evolve, you got to be intentional, right? So when you understand leadership is all about influence, and it's not about your position, you become more self-aware, right? You become more aware of your own mental health, self-care, right? Because in order to influence, you should be whole to a large degree yourself, right? You cannot put the mask on someone else if it's not on you, right? Flying in an airplane when they tell you to put the mask on, for example. So in chapter 2, I talk about being aware of yourself, being aware of where you are in the journey, and spending time on self care to sustain your energy, because leadership requires a lot of energy. Chapter 3, I talk about the essence of leadership. See, true leadership, it springs from 3 intertwined roots. And this is where we need to take a step back and ask ourselves, what are my values? Everyone should do this. Everyone who is able to comprehend the concept of values. What are your non negotiables? When you respect your own integrity, what happens? Other people will follow. But where there's none, people are going to look the other way, right? So, values, live in your values, respecting your values. Number 2 is vision, a clear, compelling North Star. It's not a to do list, it's the future that you're calling your team on to create. What is your vision as a business leader, as a CEO, as a CIO? Too often people look to the CEO for the vision. And while the ultimate vision should come from the CEO, but the CIO, the CTO, all the C level executives should have their own auxiliary visions complementing the overall organizational vision. The VP level, the director level, the manager level, all the way down to the employee who works as a janitor. It's a lifestyle, it's a habit, it's a posture. So, values your vision for the department to be the best janitor ever. Case in point, one of my mentors, Paul Martinelli, he had a cleaning company. And he grew that cleaning company to the point he sold it for $1 million. Without having values and vision, things like that are not possible. So it has nothing to do with being the top dog only. No, everyone should have values and vision and self respect, the fuel that powers consistent action. If you don't have self respect, it's going to be hard for you to evolve as a leader. If people are able to beat you down consistently, demoralize you, and you don't realize that no one can make you feel inferior without your permission, you're losing the game of leadership. I like a quote from the great Zig Ziglar. You see, Zig Ziglar, he said, you got to motivate daily. Why is that? He said, motivating is like bathing. It's like showering. You don't say, oh, I had one yesterday, so I'm not going to have one today. No, you don't do that. You have to daily motivate yourself. So I want to encourage you, if you haven't begun to daily motivate yourself, daily listen to positive energy messaging that can take you from feeling downtrodden, the dog's body and beaten up, to understanding that you can do more than your naysayers say. You see, leaders, they don't rely on the external people that are giving them negative messaging to empower them. They rely on a better power. So, my question to you is, how do you motivate daily, as Zig Ziglar was alluding to? Are you listening to positive messaging daily? Are you interconnected to a source where you realize that you are unstoppable? Do you truly believe that? You see, leaders, they understand these things. They have hope and they have heart. So if you're a leader and you are consistently a pessimist, you got to be positive. You got to give your people hope and heart. See, but it's the daily habits. It's the daily habits that make this possible. Okay, so that's pretty much what chapter 3 is all about: values, vision, and self respect. Let's go to chapter 4. Eventually, we're going to get to the framework where everything is going to come full circle. Chapter 4 is the game of influence. And in order to influence, you need to be authentic. Authenticity is your greatest asset. How do you posture yourself to be authentic? Well, you're just yourself, your values. You embody your values, you mirror your values, you live your values, you live your truth. And the word truth is connected to the word trust. Trust, as John Maxwell would say, is like change in a leader's pocket. Think about it. When you go out shopping and you've got all this currency in your wallet and you're spending it, you're spending money. And eventually, if you don't get a replenishment, there's nothing left. That's how trust is. It's like money, currency. And anytime you do something good, you get paid, right? You get a reward because people have more belief in you as a leader. But anytime you violate that trust, and I mean, I don't need to give you examples, they're all around us of leaders that have fallen short, that have disappointed us in many ways. And when you look around, you see this, and they are losing their currency very quickly. But we don't want to be like that. We need to understand that as leaders, we build trust. And there are many ways you build trust, such as doing what you said you would do, being authentic. People, they can smell a fake a mile away. You see, people understand when you're trying to cover or hide something, when you're not being yourself, you're not being vulnerable. You see, so this is a reminder to leaders: your people already know. You're trying to hide and pretend, it's not going to work out. We have to be authentic. So when you think about trust as being like a bank account. You know, when you say, okay, I'm going to put this in a trust, think about it from a financial perspective as well, mentally. What are the things that add to your trust? Number one, being consistent. Number two, competence. As a leader of an organization, say in IT, you owe it to your team to be competent, to understand the marketplace, to understand the language, to be at the center of all the action in industry as a leader. So, competence is another way you can garner trust. The reason why a lot of people trust their teachers or their professors in a college is they show competence. Another item that will add to your trust is care. Like in the words of Simon Sinek, it's not about being in charge, it's about caring, taking care of people in your charge. So when you have consistency, competence, care, and as a great Jack Welch used to say, what is missing in corporate America is candor. Fakery, right? When people are fake, they don't want to be candid, they don't want to tell the truth, they don't want to tell it like it is. Yeah, that's not going to help you. As a leader, we're not saying be mean and make negative commentaries all the time, but we're saying be candid. Be candid. Ways that you can build trust: active listening, shared stories. Some of the best leaders I know, they share stories to connect vision with a personal why. So I want to challenge you. Begin to intentionally think, how can I build trust? Having a foundation of the values, the vision, building on that. How can I throw trust in? How can I amplify it? And again, you're not going to get trust if you're not authentic, if you don't truly care about people they know. John Maxwell would say people don't care how much you know, except they know how much you care. So you could have all the competence in the world, but if you don't care, it's not going to matter. Number 5, self respect as a foundation. In chapter 5, I dig into the topic of self respect. It's the soil in which leadership habits grow, boundaries, how to say no without guilt. For the longest time, I would be invited, Phil, can you do this? Oh, yeah, I'll do it. And then I would regret saying I would do it. So I grew in that respect and I learned how to say no without guilt. You got to protect your calendar, my friends. As a leader, you got to be honest and congruent to your values. And you got to be able to say no. Because if you don't, your energy will very quickly dissipate if you say yes to everything that moves your way. So know how to set boundaries. Also, have internal dialogue. It's very important. So you got to map the inner critic. Sometimes the inner critic is very welcome, and other times the inner critic goes off the rails, putting you on a guilt trip. You don't want that. So internal dialogue has to be regulated. If you have negative beliefs and you're hearing, your internal self say back to you, you're failure, you idiot, you fool. How could you do that? You're no good. You got to reprogram that pronto. You use terminology, I am a success. I am driven. I'm a hard worker. I have a positive mental attitude. I'm unstoppable. You have to program growth mindset mantras. The reason why a lot of people feel beat up is bad programming. Someone programmed that in their head and it stuck and they started playing that tape. I'm useless. I'm hopeless. I'll never get a good, even just saying it, my mind is absolutely rebelling. I would rather say I'm unstoppable. The best is yet to come. I'm on a trajectory to success. Nothing is going to hold me back. When you reprogram your mindset on the daily, on the regular, it becomes part of you. And that will take you to the next level. But if you're thinking about failure and seeing failure as the end, nothing good comes out of that. You got to see failure as fuel. I tell my mentees, you got to see failure as fuel to fly further. Failure is fuel to fly further. John Maxwell would say, fail forward, fail often. Who cares that I didn't have a job for 9 months today? No one cares because I've refused to let it dictate who I am. I went without work twice in my adult life for almost 1.5 years. But I didn't let that stop me. I only let the failure propel me further by saying, okay, this won't work. This organization didn't work. That didn't work. But other things did. I was able to elevate myself from failed interviews to a lot of firms, from that to being a coach and mentor and trainer for the likes of NASA, the likes of the FBI and the US Army. I actually volunteered with the Army Corps of Engineers to do a 1-week training course out in Arkansas. Volunteer, pure volunteer. You see, I wouldn't have got to the levels I did if I had let that tape play. You're a failure. You've never received a job in 9 months. The end is bleak. No. So the more you reprogram yourself, the better. Some of you are PMPs, right? You're just like me. There is no difference. You got to begin to tell yourself, I'm unstoppable. I'm going to get the gig. I'm going to get the gig that best suits me. and don't stop. Don't stop learning. Don't stop growing. Don't stop reprogramming. Some folks reprogram and then they stop. You got to daily reprogram. So I need you to listen to positive messaging daily. Listen to people like my mentor, John Maxwell. Listen to people like Tony Robbins. Listen to Zig Ziglar, Ziglar. People like that. They'll help you get to the next level. Okay. So people don't just become positive. Like some, back in the day, they'll say, you're so positive. How do you overcome? It's not dumb luck, it's intention. Daily reprogramming, daily rewiring. So for self-care, I want to ask you to develop non-negotiable routines. I want you to, on the regular, daily, listen to positive messaging. Some of you might be people of faith. You might have other messaging you listen to, and that will also help you, but you got to make it intentional. It's like food. The same way you eat is the same way your brain and your mindset has to be fed. Okay? All right. So, micro care, 5-minute resets between meetings is another good way to reprogram your brain because lots of you are on the go, go, go. I know this because I talk to my mentees at PLI, Project Leadership Institute, and they work so hard. And sometimes I challenge a few of them and say, have you had a break today? Did you have lunch? No, I worked through lunch. You gotta not do that. You gotta take a break. You got to do 5-minute micro resets between meetings. It really helps. So, apart from challenging the inner critic and the negative beliefs, you gotta self care to be in your best state, to be able to think. The brain works all the time, but you got to give the brain some relief in between times. All right, take your breaks, 5-minute resets. A bottle of cold water can work wonders if only you would drink it. Or if only you would douse that on your face just to be able to perform at your optimum. I make it a point of duty whenever I'm meeting with clients, I got to make sure I'm in that right mental brain space to be at my best. Okay? And you owe it to yourself more than anyone else. All right, chapter 6, leadership brain and influence practice. So, I want you to think about action versus perfection. One thing great leaders do is they take action and they embody the agile mindset in that they take action and get a small measure of value. But a small measure of value is better than paralysis by analysis and trying to be perfect before moving. It could be the difference between success and failure. And this is where the management side of leadership comes in. You have to effectively manage. And part of effectively managing is prioritization. You got to ask what gives the biggest return and the biggest reward, and what is most urgent. What is the cost of delaying an action right now? And you got to be able to discern that. So, as a leader, there are the soft sides of leadership, but there's also the harder sides of leadership, which is being an effective manager. You got to think action over perfection, right? The 80% rule, right? 80% of your revenues come from 20% of your products. 80% of the gains will come from 20% of what is put in. You got to balance that understanding and know it's not about doing 100% all the time. You got to do the 80% that matters. Ship ideas quick, iterate fast. Now, part of your leadership brain and influence practice has to be empathy in motion. I ask myself this question all the time, especially when I'm in the middle of dialogue or in the middle of coaching or training. I do a real time empathy check. Am I acting in empathy? I scan the room, and if I feel that I'm outside or not attuned to it, I call my attention back to the world of empathy. Very important as a leader. Another part of leadership is being a good storyteller. And without mentioning names, I could mention so many names of people I know personally, but John Maxwell is a good one. And he is very quickly able to craft high impact stories, share story, and the understanding of what he's trying to convey sticks. But we as leaders should endeavor to have a story, an anecdote, an example when we work with our people. You see, the problem with a lot of leadership is they don't see themselves, unfortunately, a lot of leaders in companies, they don't see themselves as mentors or coaches. And as a result of that, when they're speaking to their people, it doesn't come across as being warm and empathetic. There are no stories, there's no data to back it up. It's really more like command control. But we, as growing leaders, we don't want to be like that. We want to share examples, we want to come down to people's levels, we want to give them anecdotes. Okay. Moving on to the concept of the retrospective. I encourage leaders to have a personal retrospective. Reflect on one leadership moment in the past week. For example, what worked and what would you do differently? What can you do differently? It's good to have these retrospectives. And when you get answers or insights, put them into production immediately. Okay. Now, it's one thing to build your leadership brain. Build your leadership brain is one thing. Getting the knowledge, the understanding, developing those leadership muscles, those neurons in your brain that help you become a better leader, being able to self regulate. Some, unfortunately, leaders, they're not very good at self regulating. They're not very good at EI. They're not good at emotional intelligence. They're very low on the scale of EI. But it's also part of being a leader. Now, on the flip side, you have some leaders that are impeccable. They look at you and they can almost tell you what you are thinking. And I've worked for some of those kinds of leaders. They're very difficult in terms of it's very difficult for you to deceive an EI acute leader because they'll look at you and they know what you're thinking. So we need to get better and better in the aspect of emotional intelligence. The emotionally intelligent leader, they know when they've hurt their people and they make restitution. You know, these things sound foreign in some companies because it's all command and control, but it shouldn't be. So we need to look in the rearview mirror and ask, what have I done well? What can I do better? And then we need to move from building the brain to growing the brain. So now that we've talked about growing the brain a little bit, let's dive into how we can do this. John Maxwell says, leadership develops daily, not in a day. Your prowess as a leader, it will develop daily. Being impatient is never a good way. Don't be impatient at your growth. Allow things to play out. Allow yourself to marinate as a leader. Like when I started with John, not only did I look different, I was different. John looks different back then as well. But through the 14 years that I have been with the John Maxwell team, I have allowed my leadership brain to not only develop, but to grow. And what I realized From John's book, How to Be a Real Success, he talks about a quote from Zig Ziglar. And Zig Ziglar says, it is not your aptitude that determines your altitude. It is more about your attitude. You see, aptitude is what you know, but your posture, your attitude is what helps you get to the altitude that you're targeting in life. Okay. To be able to evolve as a leader, to be able to grow your leadership brain, you got to embrace a beginner's mindset. You see, I remember speaking to some project managers many years ago, and they were impatient for the big stuff. And the big stuff they were looking for is the more technical and challenging projecty stuff. And I said, that's not the stuff that matters. It's not bad, but the stuff that matters is the soft stuff. That's the tough stuff. And sometimes it's the basics, it's the leadership basics that a lot of leaders are missing. Okay. And that takes us to chapter 8, the neuroscience of leadership. It's a very simple concept. New thoughts, new behaviors, they can change your brain, they can rewire your brain. When we talk about neuroplasticity, you need to see your brain as being flexible, malleable, but it all depends on programming. So, how can you reprogram your command center? You could use breathing techniques to regulate. Some people may have challenges, temper tantrums, anger. You have to use intentional techniques to regulate, right? Visualize under stress. Not everyone is gifted to stay cool, calm, and collected. Right? Some people get crazy, but with intentionality, you can reprogram your brain. You can reprogram how you react. You can reprogram your command center. Your brain mirrors others' emotions. So, as the good book said, you have to guard your mental, guide your mind, guard it. And that's why when I hear negative programming, I shut it off. I either turn it off if it's playing in media, or if it's playing on TV, I turn it off, or if someone's saying it, I excuse myself because I don't want to become contaminated. Now, Eleanor Roosevelt said it well, no one can make you feel inferior without your consent. It's a thing of programming. You got to give your brain consent to feel downtrodden and useless, right? So leaders must first understand themselves, their strengths, their weaknesses, their emotions, their biases. Their biases, I said that twice because those biases need to be brought under control, right? So this awareness forms the foundation for personal growth and influence. I want to challenge you to spend 10 minutes daily, spending some time in reflection and asking, what could I have done better today? What could I have done better in the last meeting I was in? You don't even have to wait till the end of the day. You can make the Kaizen mindedness a lifestyle. See, it doesn't have to be something you do at the end of the day or at the end of the project. You can make it a lifestyle. And when you make these things a lifestyle, they become ingrained and they start adding more and more value to you. Now, before we leave today, I want to break down leadership in a more understandable way because I know a lot of what I've been speaking about is the principles, the practices, the foundations, but taking it up a notch to make it a little bit more pragmatic, I want you to take a look at the link I shared in the chat. I shared that link, and this is part of the book, Build Your Leadership Brain. And I wrote this book with this framework in there to help people better understand leadership from a very fundamental perspective, very easy to grasp and to use as a mirror. Now, it contains a lot of insights that I have embraced along the way from John Maxwell and other leaders. And it also serves as a beacon for those who are new to leadership. If someone asked you, what is leadership? Now you have a recipe in what I shared to better explain leadership to your followers, to your team members, to anyone, to friends. At least you have a framework now. So let's jump into the leadership framework at a very high level. Each letter in the word leadership is represented here. L. As I said in the very beginning, in order for you to effectively lead to the max, you got to understand likability. Because nobody wants to work for a horrible leader. Nobody wants to work with a horrible leader. Likability will get you there faster and better, more effectively. When you get into an organization, does it strike you, did it ever struck you that, wow, what leverage do I have? I guess all I've got is, well, they got my resume. That's why they gave me the job. But beyond the resume and the job, how else can you leverage influence? You got nothing. You got no history in that job. So you can't say, well, they know my track record, so they'll follow me. No, they don't know your track record. You just got there, right? So number one is likability. I encourage people, especially new leaders in new firms, you got to be likable. It's not about you being the chief executive or you being the program manager, whatever your title is. Likability will get you there quicker. The second thing that people often pick up on, and some folks are totally clueless about empathy, while others are very attuned to empathy. You know, Sir Richard Branson is one of them, very attuned to empathy, and the track record speaks for itself. Mandela is another good example, and I'll give you some examples before we leave today when we get into the next section where we go into the details. Agility, leaders have got to be agile. You got to have bounce back ability. The market is changing. There's a trending curve. Are you ignoring it? Or are you attuned to it? Are you following it? The next one is decisiveness, being able to make decisions in a timely fashion. It's not just making a decision, 20 years after the fact. It's about making a decision in a timely fashion. E in leadership, the second E is for evolution, and this is all about growth, your growth, you growing as a leader. R is for resourcefulness, doing the most with what you've got. You might have just one item out of 10 that you're seeking, but can you leverage resourcefulness to make the most of it? S is for being a servant leader. I'm going to go through the 10 tenets of servant leadership with you as established by Robert Greenleaf. H is for hope and heart, having courage, having determination, and a positive mental attitude. I is for innovation, being an innovative person, and P is for problem solving. So let's dive into these as quickly as possible. L. The L in leadership is likability. It's the foundation of leadership. Why does it matter? Well, likability is like a bridge that connects your vision to the hearts of your team. When people like you, they give you the benefit of doubt in ambiguity. In times of crisis or conflict, likability is like a reservoir of goodwill that you draw from. You see, likability, it sparks collaboration. Teams work harder when they feel connected to their leader. And apart from that, when you look at the interconnectedness between teams, teams that have a higher level of collaboration, they get along better. They like each other, they get along better. And this is why we often talk about the 5 stages of team development: forming, storming, which is always hard, but it doesn't have to be that bad if you've got a capable leader that understands the dynamics. Forming, storming, norming, performing. And to get to performing, there should be these elements of truly enjoying work and liking the work that you're doing with the team members that you are. So, I want you to take a moment on a scale of 1 to 10. How likable do you think your colleagues would rate you? Hold that thought, and I'm going to ask you further questions about rating yourself. And maybe tomorrow you can ask a colleague on a scale of 1 to 10, how likable am I? It's a very good exercise. Yeah. Talking about Nelson Mandela, as I mentioned earlier, a story about Nelson Mandela and the Springboks rugby team. You see, when there was a lot of controversy at its height in 1995, Mandela could have ignored the Springboks team and just done the minimum. But there was a lot of controversy around the Springboks team, but he wore a Springboks jersey at the 1995 World Cup. And it was like a magic wand that just united a fractured nation through empathy. Wearing a jersey. Who would have thought that something so small would be so symbolic and would yield such a return? But it did. I have personal stories about likability as well. You know, when I was at Honeywell, I volunteered free PMP exam coaching to a lot of folks who were failing the exam. And my contract ended, and I remember telling people, okay, my contract has ended. I'm looking for work again. And this was on a Thursday. But as a result of my likability, I had people jumping in to give extremely good reviews to a hiring manager that I'd approached for a new job in IT effectiveness. So by Monday morning, I was back at Honeywell. Why is that? Because of the likability that had generated as a result of me giving back to my colleagues. I had them calling the hiring manager saying, if you don't hire this guy, you missed the boat. And it's really as a result of likability. I know it wasn't because I was so good, but it was really more as a result of them putting in a word for me because they trusted me and they liked me. See? So, how can you put this into practice? I want to challenge you. Some folks, they don't show their likability weapons. When I say weapons, I'm not talking about actual weapons. I'm talking about your 32 weapons called teeth. Well, if you have 32, I don't have 32 anymore. Some wisdom teeth have been pulled out. But honestly, a smile goes a long way in making you more approachable, more likable. Just having already smiled, I want to challenge you. Why not smile at 3 people today? Just practice it. It changes their world. And I'm telling you, it changes your world as well, chemically, in a good way. You may not know. I also want you to be aware of tone and posture in your next conversation. What vibe are you getting from the person you're speaking to? Practice the art of mirroring because it does make you more likable. I also want you to practice giving small, genuine compliments. Giving a genuine compliment, like intentionally practice it. It goes a long way in making you likable. I see people not wanting to give compliments to others. I don't want him to get a big head. No, it's all right to give compliments. And the give first gesture. Share resources or introductions without expecting return. Okay. All right. Moving really quickly through the next number of slides. Empathy and communication. This is the bridge to connecting. Empathy is feeling alongside someone else and being willing to take action. to help that person, to get that person to a different state. You see, there's a difference between empathy and sympathy. Sympathy may acknowledge someone's pain, but empathy goes further. It actually drives you to take action, to do something about it. See? And when we talk about communication, it's the bridge to connecting. Those who are able to effectively communicate, they get further along than those who cannot. All right, let's move on to agility. As I mentioned in the beginning, agility is the ability to adapt and to respond quickly to changes, to challenges, and opportunities. There's a cost of rigidity. As I have mentioned in a previous webinar, I give you examples of the likes of Blockbuster, who were tardy to the party. I talk about Toys R Us and many others. But if we look at Netflix and how they were able to be agile, respond to the market need, it just made them a leader, a beast in this area of entertainment. So when you're agile, when you have the ability to pivot and be more flexible, you get further ahead. D, decisiveness. Decisiveness means making clear, informed decisions. I talk about this quite a lot in the book, and I give you a framework for solving problems in the book called the Dixive approach. Always define the problem first, identify the root cause of the problem, generate alternatives, choose the best alternative, implement that alternative, and then verify that that actually worked. So, in the real world, to be decisive, you need a framework for making decisions and solving problems. All right, moving on. E for evolution. Evolution is the constant growth of a leader. Evolution is the ongoing intentional practice of learning, adapting, and growing to meet ever changing demands. And as leaders, it is so important that we look at ourselves as being work in progress at all times, growing and evolving. Leaders who stop evolving, they risk being obsolete. They risk obsolescence. If you're not growing, believe this, you are falling behind. In order to be more intentional about your evolution, I want to encourage you to learn, set goals, actually invest in your learning and embrace a growth mindset. How about investing in coaching, mentoring, training, as opposed to looking for everything to be free? Why not look for the highest quality for yourself? After all, it's for you, right? Let's move on to the next letter. The next letter is R, resourcefulness. Resourcefulness, achieving more with less. This is the art of finding solutions where others see roadblocks. This is about achieving extraordinary results with ordinary resources. So I talk about this in the book. I say that the resourceful leader is the one who finds solutions, not shortages. And I know that the favorites of many leaders are those who are resourceful. The people who can take less and make it more. I talk about an example in the book about William Kamkwamba. At 14, he built a wind turbine from bicycle parts to power his family's home in Malawi. And this demonstrates, of course, being resourceful. The Apollo 13 crew was stranded in space. What did the astronauts do? They used duct tape, plastic bags, and spacesuit hoses to fashion a life saving CO2 scrubber. You don't need a whole lot to do great things. So you may look at your limited education that you think is so little, or your limited knowledge, but you can do great things if you posture with the right mindset. Let's go to the 10 tenets of servant leadership, because you might have heard about servant leadership in the past. But what exactly is it? Well, the great Robert Greenleaf, rest his soul, he coined this term, being a servant leader. He says the servant leader is servant first. It begins with the natural feeling that one wants to serve first. The core concept of servant leadership flips the traditional hierarchy. Your primary role as leader, it is to support, empower, and grow your team. So, as opposed to you seeing yourself as the person who is served and worshipped, you see yourself as the one who serves others. And by prioritizing others' needs, you build loyalty, you build trust, and long term performance. So, what are the 10 tenets of servant leadership? Number one is listening, active listening. Seek to understand before being understood. Number two is empathy, recognizing and relating to others' feelings. Number three is healing, help individuals overcome personal and professional struggles. Number four, awareness, staying mindful of your own strengths and limitations. Next is persuasion, influencing through reason and consensus, not carrot and sticks. Next is conceptualization. Think beyond the day to day to envision the future. Next is foresight, being able to anticipate what's coming around the bend, potential outcomes and consequences. Next is stewardship, taking responsibility for the larger community. Number nine is commitment to growth, investing in personal and professional development of others. And lastly, building community, fostering collaboration and belonging, having that burning desire to see groups, teams, organizations come together. A real world example is Gandhi. Gandhi, he led by walking alongside his followers, demonstrating solidarity and humility. Gandhi empowered ordinary citizens to act nonviolently for a shared cause, illustrating servant leadership in practice. So, what can you do to get to this next level in servant leadership? Well, I often challenge leaders to have a rotating list. I call it a value list of people on their team and how they will add value to each one week at a time. Person one, week one, person two, week two, and just make that a revolving door. Or to ask the question, what can I do to support you this week? Scheduling one on ones focused on career growth and personal well being, not just tasks, but really asking people how they are mentally. Volunteering as a mentor outside your immediate team to broaden your circle of influence. And how about recognizing and celebrating acts of service within your team? Let's move on to the letter H. H is for hope and heart. As a leader, hope is the belief in a better future that guides teams through uncertainty. Teams need hope. They don't need you to tell them the negative facts. They can see the facts. But how are you giving them hope? How are you taking them levels above? You also, as a leader, need heart. Heart is courage and passion to take bold actions, to challenge the status quo. I like a quote from the great Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs said, "Why join the Navy when you can be a pirate?" He wasn't saying be a pirate in a negative sense. He was just saying, why toe the line when you can flip things on its head? And he was quite the rebel, but he would never have gone to where he did without having that mindset and that posture. So I want to ask you, what are you doing to challenge the status quo? Are you just towing the line like a dumb sheep, or are you challenging the status quo where you can? You see, this is next level thought, next level leadership. Some people, they find it very hard to be courageous. I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want problems. And honestly, your people can smell fear a mile away. Don't be a fearful leader. Have courage, have passion, bold. Take on the big, hairy, audacious goals. This is what will take you and your team to the next level. No one gets anywhere by being so risk averse, so scared of the market, so scared of just stepping outside of their territory. No. Have boldness, have courage, have hope. Okay, let's move on. I is for innovation. Innovation is the distinguishing mark of a leader. Steve Jobs said, innovation distinguishes between a leader and a follower. The core concept is innovation is the ability to think creatively, to challenge the status quo, and turn bold ideas into practical solutions that advance your organization and inspire your team. The key takeaway here is innovation is what leaders do. They innovate and followers replicate. When you innovate, you're ensuring that future needs and new technologies are embraced, not rejected. An example is artificial intelligence. A lot of people running away from AI. Great leaders should not be running away from AI. They should be running to AI and asking the question, how can we harness AI for our competitive advantage, for our growth, for our betterment? A real world example of this is the great Steve Jobs and the people at Apple and the iPhone. Jobs' team integrated phone, music player, and internet communicator into one revolutionary device, setting a new standard for mobile technology. Who would have thought about that? But let's go even further back. Let's talk about the Wright brothers. They defied skepticism and they leveraged experimentation to achieve powered flight, changing transportation forever. What about post 9/11 innovations? Heightened security needs. They led to advancements in surveillance, intelligence tech, and the creation of the TSA. Innovation born from adversity. So, what steps can we take to be more innovative? This is a question I get quite often. As opposed to just saying the proverbial think out of the box, maybe what you could do in your firm is host monthly blue sky ideation sessions where no idea is too wild. Some of the best ideas come when we build on each other's ideas. As my mentor John Maxwell will say, one person can give a good idea, but when you compound that good idea with someone else's, you're going to eventually get a great idea. How about building some failure postmortems into your project management to harvest learning? It's one thing to say, oh, this went wrong, but it's another thing to ask, what can we do better? Right? What can we take away from this and go to a whole new level in the firm? How about allocating a regular innovation hour on your calendar for exploratory experiments? How about recognizing and rewarding the most daring ideas each quarter, regardless of outcome? Let's move on to our final letter in our leadership journey. The final letter is problem solving, turning challenges into opportunities. You see, problem solving is the leader's craft, identifying challenges, uncovering root causes, and developing sustainable strategic solutions rather than quick fixes. In order to be great at problem solving, you need to have a framework, a method to the madness. And the method that I talk about in the book is the Dig Sieve approach. I'm going to write these on the screen. Excuse my handwriting here because I do not have a stylus, but I'm going to write the letters just so they register. D is you got to define the problem as clearly as possible. Okay. I, you got to identify the root cause of the problem. So defining the problem is one thing, but identifying the root cause a whole other thing, right? G is to generate alternatives through brainstorming, using approaches like Ed DeBono's six thinking hats and critical thinking, which takes us to choosing the best alternative, implementing the alternative, and verifying if the alternative actually worked. So we have defining the problem, identifying the root cause, generating alternatives, choosing the best alternative, implementing it, and verifying that it did indeed work. What are some examples, real world examples of this? You might remember the story back in 2010, back in Chile, when these miners were trapped, right? That was a really tough situation. But engineers designed the Phoenix rescue capsule to save 33 miners. And that demonstrated teamwork, great problem solving. We can also look back in time when Winston Churchill combined practical air defense strategies with morale boosting communications, solving both tactical and emotional crises simultaneously. So, your action steps are to apply the Dixive approach to your problem solving. Over the past number of minutes, my friends, we've been talking about leadership, building your leadership brain, realizing that there's more to learn in leadership, and being intentional about it. And I shared with you, like right here on the screen, a link to the leadership framework. Okay. So if you haven't been to that link, please go there. You'll be able to download this chart, which I'm going to share on the screen in a moment. And this chart is really a reminder of what leadership is. This will help you as you teach leadership to others. Because leadership could be very nebulous, it could be just so far out. But if you have something like this, right, this could help you at least recall some of the things we've talked about today. All right, so that's what you get at the link. It's free, download it, and begin to intentionally practice leadership. And then the book, Build Your Leadership Brain, you can find that on Amazon. Now we're pretty much done, almost done, but there's just one other little piece left. And this next piece is what I call a roadmap. It's a roadmap for leadership to help you in your leadership trajectory. So let me share that on the screen and we'll be out of here very shortly. All right. So I call this a 21-step roadmap, and you can find this spoken about more in the book. I'll just give you the top of the ways very quick. Number one, understand that leadership is influence. Nothing more, nothing less. Next, understand that leadership is not the same as authority, as I mentioned earlier. Leaders inspire others. So, as a leader, look to inspire, look to motivate. Inspiration is long lasting. Motivation may be a little bit more transient, but they're both important for immediate results and for long term results. Inspiration is more long term. Leaders care and engage with others on a personal level. Leaders are visionary. Cast that vision. People need to hear that vision multiple times before it sinks in. Great leaders cast vision, and great leaders recast vision. Leaders value and empower others. Leaders challenge the status quo. Leaders lead in every direction. They lead up, down, sideways, and outward. Leaders effectively communicate and connect with others. Leaders show empathy. Leaders value time and they use it to their advantage. Leaders produce results. They embody integrity. Leaders add value to people. Leaders sustain and improve performance. Leaders employ those with skills they lack. And lastly, leaders grow other leaders. Okay, my friends, we have come to the end of Build Your Leadership Brain. Basics, fundamentals to help those looking to get to the next level in leadership. Thank you very much for joining. I see my buddy Ed joined. Thank you very much, Ed. No problem. This will be available to everyone who needs to learn the topic of leadership. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, you can always put them the link below. I have one more day because tomorrow will be exactly 20 years since I got PMP certified. And this is to mark all of the certifications that I have gotten along the way. Today is about the John Maxwell team. Now we call it the Maxwell Leadership Team. So if you haven't joined John Maxwell's Minute with Maxwell, I want to give you that as a final tip. Let me see if I can put that in the chat, because a minute with Maxwell will give you videos that will catapult you into great leadership growth. My friends on Instagram, I didn't forget you. Thank you for coming through. And everyone on YouTube and Facebook, I'm going to put that link to Minute with Maxwell. These are free videos from John. But honestly, John is someone you want to follow. If you're not following him on social media, please do so, because the way I grew in leadership is the same way you could just catapult your growth by joining Minute with Maxwell, learning. And like I said, there are a few books I would highly recommend: The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, The 360-Degree Leader, and The 5 Levels of Leadership from John Maxwell. I highly recommend all those books. All right. Well, thank you very much, my friends. All the very best. And I'll see you again very soon. Bye.